Saludos a toda la afición de Lucha Libre Online. Este que les habla es Michael Morales Torres, integrante del equipo de Lucha Libre Online. Y tenemos el enorme privilegio de presentarles a nuestro invitado especial en la tarde de hoy. Gente, nacido en Texas, pero de Tennessee en estos momentos en directo desde allá, Dr. Tom Prichard is in the house here on Lucha Libre Online. Dr. Prichard, it is an honor for us to have you here. How are you doing today?
Thank you, Michael. I'm doing great today, man. It's a beautiful day in Knoxville, Tennessee. It couldn't ask for a better time, man.
Perfect, man. And thank you so much for being here. I'm glad you're having a good day. And I wanted to start the interview asking you, how did your passion for pro wrestling started?
Well, you know, I was born in El Paso, Texas, and I remember actually all the posters and all the advertising saying wrestling, and under that was Lucha Libre. So I started learning about Lucha Libre from a very, very young age. When I was like 4 years old, that's my first recollection. And Gory Guerrero promoted in El Paso and Juarez and various places in Mexico. And I just grew up, I remember seeing it on TV. My brothers watched it, my older brothers watched it, and I fell in love with it from the first time I saw it on television, and I just pursued it to the end, and finally lived my dream. And it was great. It was tremendous. I got the best of both worlds. I got to grow up in West Texas until I was 10 years old. Moved to East Texas and saw some of the greatest wrestlers in the business all through my life.
Perfect, I'll translate that. ¿Cómo comienza la pasión de Dr. Tom Prichard por la industria de la lucha libre? Sencillo, él nace en El Paso, Texas, y quien corría en El Paso, Texas, lucha libre era Gory Guerrero, el papá de Eddie, el abuelo de Chavito, entre muchísimas otras personas, pero Gory Guerrero corría y su primera memoria de la lucha libre comienza a los 4 años, cuando ve los posters o los paquines de los diferentes eventos de lucha libre que había allí. Entonces, a través del tiempo, él vivió un tiempo en West Texas, en la parte oeste de Texas, se muda después de los 10 al este de Texas y tiene la oportunidad de ver lo mejor de lo mejor en aquel momento en la industria, pasar por todo el estado de Texas. You know, from being that kid that dreamed to be a pro wrestler once you saw it for the first time at 4 years old, how do you manage to, you know, go into the other side of the fence and start training pro wrestling? Because you train with none other than the Iron Sheik.
Yes. Well, what happened, and this I'll try to keep it short so you can translate, unless you got a good memory, man.
Yeah, I got a good memory.
Okay, good. When we moved to Houston when I was 10, Paul Bosch had just taken over for Morris Siegel, who passed away. And we used to go to the matches every Friday night. My mom, my brother Bruce, and I would go to the matches. It was her way to get out, and the tickets were like $5 a piece. And we became friends with some of the people around there. And eventually we got permanent reservations down ringside. And this is where Paul Bosch's future wife was sitting, and my mom became friends with her and the lady that sat in front of us as well. And every Friday night we were there, and I told Mr. Bosch I wanted to wrestle. He said, "You're too small. You're just way too small." And we went every Friday night and just devoted fans. And I'll never forget, my brother got me a job selling shoes at Montgomery Ward's, which is a horrible department store. And I was in the office one Thursday or Friday afternoon getting our tickets, and I was telling the ladies in the office about how horrible this job was. And Paul actually walked out of his office and heard me talking about these stories, and he says, "Oh, those are going to give you stories for life. That job will give you stories for life." And then he looked at me and said, "How would you like to work here?" And just like that, it was incredible, because that couldn't have happened any other way except, "How would you like to work here?" He paid me $75 a week, and I had my learner's permit to drive. I was 15 years old. I would have paid him to work there, but it was a wrestling office. It had pictures all over. It was like a museum. I was selling tickets. I would get to see the guys come in on Fridays for meetings. Gary Hart was a booker. He would come in every Friday. And so Paul knew I wanted to wrestle, and a good wrestler always brings his gear. I'd read that forever. And I always brought workout gear with me, and just in the trunk, just in case something happened. And wouldn't you know it, one Friday night, there was a football player who wanted to get into wrestling. And Gary Hart Bronco Lubitsch and the Iron Sheik drove in from Dallas, and it was going to be the Sheik teaching this football player how to wrestle. And Paul came out to me and says, "You can take him down to the Coliseum, and if you want to get in there, you can too." Oh my gosh, if I want to get in there, of course. So we went down to the Coliseum, and I'm thinking the Sheik is going to put on his pointy boots and his camel trunks and things like that. He wears his Olympic singlet and his Olympic wrestling shoes, amateur wrestling shoes. And I'll never forget, because the first time he told me to get down on all fours, he actually he got down on all fours, and he said, "Try to turn me over." And he just turtled on me, sat down, and couldn't do anything. He says, "Now I'm going to get you over." And he took me over, and he got me in a hole. To this day, I couldn't tell you what it was, because he was stretching me and hurting my neck. And he said, "Scream, scream." I said, okay. He said, "No, louder, louder." I said, "You got it. I give up. And he did the same thing to the football player. Then he taught us how to lock up, and he was trying to tell us how to lock up solid and stiff. First thing I did was slap him on his ear. Not a good thing to do. And he slapped the hell out of him. So from there, it continued. The football player lasted another week. Cosgrove came in to the office, I think, 3 weeks after that. We trained about a month and a half, 2 months at the most. And then Nick Kozak and a guy named Joe Mercer had a ring down at their record service. We kept going down there. A guy named King Parsons was also breaking in at the same time. And eventually they had a show in Bryan, Texas, and Paul gave me his blessing to go start. And I started October 20th, 1979, and continued from there.
I'll translate that. ¿Cómo comienza o acabó Dr. Tom Prichard para llegar a la industria de la lucha libre? Bueno, su mamá y su hermano Bruce Prichard iban todo el tiempo a un evento de lucha libre, a una empresa de lucha libre que era de Paul Bosch, anteriormente en Texas. El boleto costaba $5, just $5 el precio del boleto. Y iban todos los viernes se sentaban allí en primera fila, y en esa misma fila se sentaba la esposa de Paul Bosch. Y su mamá se hizo amiga de la esposa de Paul Bosch. Él le dice a Paul, mira, me gustaría ser luchador. Paul le dice, no, you're too small, eres muy pequeño. Y pues está bien, como que se le fue eso de la mente. En ese transcurso, su hermano Bruce le consigue un trabajo en una tienda llamada Montgomery de venta de zapatos, un retailment store. Lo odiaba, no le gustaba. Pero él dice, cuando llega allí, va a esta tienda, que esto, que si lo otro, Paul le dice, Sato, vas a tener por lo menos historias para contar toda tu vida. ¿Qué te parecería trabajar aquí en la oficina de lucha libre? Yo, trabajar en la oficina de lucha libre, yo pagaría por trabajar en la empresa de lucha libre, y tú me estás pagando a mí $75 a la semana, vendido. Entonces llega allí, tiene todos estos posters de lucha libre y ve todos los luchadores llegando. Entre ellos, quien llegaba para todas las reuniones semanales era Gary Hart, que era uno de los bookers de la empresa en aquel momento. Llega el punto en donde el señor Paul Bosch y Gary le dicen, bueno, hay un jugador de fútbol que va a estar entrenando lucha libre por primera vez, y van a traer para acá, entre otras personas, a The Iron Sheik, que van a viajar a Dallas para hacer eso. Entonces él dice, ok, perfecto, no hay problema. Gary está de acuerdo. Paul le dice a Dr. Prichard, ok, Tom, vas a llevar al jugador de fútbol allí a entrenar. Si te interesa, puedes meterte al ring. Claro que puedo meterme al ring. En todo este transcurso siempre le dijeron, siempre trae tu atuendo, always bring your gear, como le dijeron. Eso es una de las reglas de lucha libre. Entonces llega allí, le toca entrenar con Iron Sheik, y Iron Sheik la primera vez le dice, él se pone como que en cuclillas, como va en una posición de lucha amateur. En vez de ponerse las botas puntiagudas, se puso los zapatos de lucha amateur y le hace una movida. Él comienza a tirarle el cuello y le dice, scream, scream, louder, louder. Empieza a gritar, más duro, más duro. Y está bien, me rindo. Historia larga corta, el talento de fútbol dura una semana. Dr. Prichard comienza a entrenar y está 2 meses aproximadamente entrenando con Iron Sheik y con el resto del equipo. Y de momento, en octubre de 1979, comienza a hacer su debut con la bendición de Paul Bosch en aquel momento en el circuito independiente de Texas. So you made your debut in October 1979. What do you recall of that first match? That kid that had a dream to make his pro wrestling debut is finally making it. How do you feel at that moment going through that curtain?
I was a wreck, man. I was nervous. It was outside. It was an event to showcase a guy named Ernie Holmes, who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was another football player, and he was in the main event. I was in the opening match, and I was completely nervous. I didn't know what to do. The guy I was wrestling worked at the record service. He had a mask on called El Satanico #2. And so we had the match, and he was not easy on me at all. He knocked me around a few times, took a chair, laid me open on the back, and but it was great. It was a lot of fun. It was great, and Bruce came to the ring with me, so that was nice to share that moment with him as well. And it was the opening up of, wow, I'm finally getting to do this, and it was great. It was fantastic because that's what I always wanted to do. And from there, I got booked around Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and just continued on until finally I got booked out in 1980.
I'll translate that. ¿Cómo comienza esta travesía en 1979 para Tom Prichard? Sencillo. Hay un evento de lucha en octubre del 79 que era para exponer a un jugador de fútbol de los Steelers llamado Bernie Holmes. Historia larga corta, él dice que estaba bien nervioso en muchos aspectos. Su hermano Bruce Prichard es quien lo acompaña al cuadrilátero y su oponente fue Satánico 2, quien no se la puso difícil, no se la puso fácil, un luchador enmascarado que le dio trabajo, pero a partir de eso comienza entonces a crecer, participando en el circuito de Texas, en Luisiana, en Mississippi, en Arkansas, y ahí el resto es historia. Tuvo la oportunidad de entonces compartir este gran momento con su hermano. You were pretty popular on the NWA under the multiple circuits they had. What do you remember of working with the vintage NWA?
The NWA I grew up on, so that was very, very cool. And my first full-time territory was supposed to be Portland, Oregon, but Gary told me I was going to stop off in LA, Los Angeles for 2 weeks and then move to Portland. Well, I got to Los Angeles and Chavo Guerrero was booking. And I asked Chavo after the first week, I said, when do I leave for Portland? He says, you're not leaving, you're staying here. And I went, wow, okay. And I was having a great time in Los Angeles. It's Hollywood. I'm 20 years old. It's the beach. It's the girls. It's the sunshine. It's the going to all these classic venues like the Olympic Auditorium, Bakersfield Arena, Fresno Wilson Arena, all these classic wrestling buildings I heard about. So it was a very surreal time for me to not only wrestle, get into professional wrestling, but under the NWA banner. I mean, now we have the world champion Harley Race coming in, and I'm riding with the referee one time, and Harley's on the card. We pick up Harley at the airport. I'm nervous. I don't know what to say. I mean, I've been around wrestling, working in the office and things, but I still had this mystery. It was still a mystery. It was still just new to me, and it was still so cool. It was great, and I had probably the greatest time of my life the first 2 years in the business.
I'll translate that. Ok, Dr. Tom Prichard tenía planificado luchar en la NWA, ahí es donde él crece, ahí es donde le dan su primer personaje fijo, y originalmente iba a ser en Portland, Oregon. De momento está luchando en Los Ángeles, California, y Chavo Guerrero Sr. le dice, oye, tú no vas para Portland, tú te quedas aquí en Los Ángeles, porque él le preguntó cuándo iba para Portland. Le dice como que no, te quedas aquí en Los Ángeles. Perfecto, 20 años, jovencito, la playa, todos estos monumentos históricos, Hollywood, todas estas arenas características de California, y para él fue excelente, fue una buena alternativa. Ahí es donde él crece, y él dice que él tiene sus mejores 2 años dentro de la industria, que fue mientras iba creciendo inicialmente. After that, you wrestle on United States Wrestling Association, or USWA, for a while, working with the likes of Stone Cold Steve Austin at that point, Steve Austin, or Eric Embry, Jeff Jarrett. I mean, what do you recall of your time during this company, but specifically facing or teaming or sharing the ring with talents that eventually came up to be something huge?
Well, that was about my 4th time to be in the territory, and we were working Texas and Tennessee back and forth. And there was a lot of great untapped natural talent. Jeff Jarrett was back then one of the very best. And a lot of times guys would get in the ring and didn't want to help Jeff because his dad ran the territory and it wasn't a very well-paying territory at the time. But I was looking at it as an opportunity, and I was looking at every time I got in the ring with Jeff to demonstrate that we worked together well. We had a chemistry, and it really clicked. But again, it took me about 4 times to figure that out. You know, each time I would leave bitter and mad or whatever it was may be. But at this time, you had guys like Jeff, you had Steve Austin, Eric Embry became a friend when I was there, and he was booking. So he'd rather have me inside the tent rather than outside the tent. And we were the top heels there. It was Texas versus Tennessee. And it was interesting and fulfilling to watch Stone Cold. Actually, he was stunning Steve Austin at this time, to watch him grow, to watch him develop and ask questions. We both lived in the same place and traveled a lot together. And the great thing about that is he's remained the same person he was then that he is now inside. I mean, obviously a lot of things changed for his career, and he made the most of it. And I'm very happy for him. I was happy for him then. I'm happy for him now.
Perfect. I'll translate that. Dr. Plum Prichard comienza en USWA y da muchos viajes allá. En aquel momento dado, el territorio era de Jarrett, el papá de Jeff, y no pagaban muy bien. Por eso había mucha gente molesta y no querían hacerle el trabajo a su hijo, Jeff Jarrett, un joven Jeff Jarrett de los 80. Don Prichard comienza a trabajar con él y se encarga de entonces elevarlo al próximo nivel, pero lo tomó 4. En la cuarta ocasión es que entonces él entiende que es lo que están haciendo, porque siempre que perdía o hacían algo se iba molesto o descontento, no le gustaba la experiencia, hasta que eventualmente entiende pues de qué se trataba todo esto y que estaba elevando a esa joven estrella. En aquel momento estaba Eric Embry, que era el booker, era un muy buen amigo de Dr. Tom Prichard, y tenías también a Stunning Steve Austin, que eventualmente se convertiría en Stone Cold Steve Austin, con quien Prichard trabajó muchos años, y él dice que podías apreciar esa evolución de Steve, porque él preguntaba, vivían juntos, preguntaba todo, no tenía dudas no tenía miedo a preguntar, a querer mejorar, viajaban juntos, hacían todo juntos, y ver esa evolución de Stone Cold, como él dice, que todavía es la misma persona por dentro, claro, la fama y todo, pero sigue siendo el mismo ser humano que fue en aquel momento. You work also in a pretty particular territory that was hot as hell at the moment, and I'm talking about Smoky Mountain Wrestling. How was that experience working there for you, specifically working with Jim Cornette?
Well, I have to tell you, I've known Jim since the early 80s, and it was a great opportunity. He called me when I was in Memphis, actually, and told me he was opening up this new territory. Would I be interested in coming in and being a team with Stan Lane, calling ourselves the Heavenly Bodies? And that came about because Bobby Eaton was still in WCW, and he was under contract, but Stan and Jim had had enough. They couldn't stand it anymore. So they came out, and Jim asked me if I wanted to be a part of the team. And I said, of course. I mean, they had already been there, done that. They made big money. They understood how to make great angles work and work with great guys. So we were originally going to work with the Fantastics, and then the Rock and Roll Express became available. And we worked with some great teams, the gangsters in Smoky Mountain. Smoky Mountain Wrestling was a great time. It was a cool time to be there because Cornette was the top manager. I knew we had a spot. It wasn't just going in for a job. We had a position, and I know we'd be featured in that territory. And that was what I was looking for. So it came along at the right time, and I knew this was the time to jump on board.
I'll translate that. Dr. Tom Prichard trabaja en Smoky Mountain Wrestling, en aquel momento un territorio nuevo que Jim Cornette crea en Memphis, en Tennessee, y llama a Dr. Tom Prichard, le dice, oye, voy a crear este proyecto, ¿quieres venir para acá? Él dice que sí. Ahí nace el famoso grupo, el famoso equipo, los Heavenly Bodies, en donde estaba Jim o Jimmy del Rey. Pero lo interesante de esto es que ahí él dice que él comienza a crecer, ahí entonces comienza a crecer también como talentos, tiene la oportunidad en equipo de enfrentarse a personas como el Rock and Roll Express, por darte un ejemplo, tenían una posición ya más sólida, Jim Cornette iba a ser su manejador y todo fue viento en popa, vamos a decirlo de esta manera. How do you got approached initially by the WWF, and what do you recall of your first run with the company?
Well, I tell you, my brother had been there for years, and one day it was I don't remember, probably right before the summer of '93. My dad came to visit me in Smoky Mountain, and we cut a promo as a rib. My dad, myself, by this time Stan was gone and Jimmy Del Rey was in, and or Stan, no, yeah, Jimmy was in, and we sent it to Bruce, and Bruce watched it in front of Pat Patterson. I'm not sure who else was in the room. Might have been Vince as well, and they had Mr. Fuji as a spokesman for Yokozuna at the time. They saw Cornette. They'd wanted Cornette earlier on, years before, but it was, the time wasn't right. So this was the time to make an offer for us to come in, Heavenly Bodies and Jim Cornette, to have a tag match against the Steiner brothers in Detroit, SummerSlam '93, and that's how it worked. We had done a match prior to this in WCW against the Rock and Roll Express in Asheville, North Carolina. So we were on a WCW pay-per-view and WWF at the time pay-per-view in the same year, so close to the summer months. And that's how it happened. They wanted Cornette, but he knew he wouldn't come without the Heavenly Bodies. So once they got him there, they immediately, first day, took him in for a meeting and said, hey, we want you to be the American spokesman for Yokozuna, which, of course, he couldn't turn down. They also wanted him to work in the office and help with creative. And that was something I don't think he was too excited about, because he loved working and living down south. And up north is a completely different vibe, completely different attitude. But Eventually he agreed, and eventually he became part of the creative team. And we had a run. We being Jimmy Del Rey and myself, should have been more aggressive in our run, and we should have spoke up more, but we didn't. We were content, and you can't be content. You can't be complacent and just happy to be there, because when you do, nobody really pays attention to you. But we were at that time just content. And in the ring, we worked great. Out of the ring, we were two different people. I got along with Jimmy, but we just did different things. So that's how that went.
I'll translate that. Okay, ellos los contactan inicialmente de WWF. Su hermano Bruce Prichard ya estaba en la oficina, pero WWF quería a Jim Cornette, que era su manejador. Jim Cornette no iba a llegar a la empresa sin The Heavenly Bodies, porque eran sus muchachos. Traen a Jim Cornette, los traen a ellos, y la intención inicial era poner a Jim Cornette con Yokozuna, de manejador americano o estadounidense. Él acepta esa parte. Con la parte que no estuvo muy contenta fue con la parte de creativa en la oficina. ¿Por qué? Jim Cornette siempre vivió al sur. He always lived in the south. Y de momento mudarlo al norte, a Connecticut, la vibra era distinta, no era muy buena, a lo que eventualmente también acepta. En el tiempo que estuvieron los Heavenly Bodies allí, muy importante, en WCW estuvieron un pay-per-view ese mismo año contra The Rock and Roll Express. Entonces llegan a WWF y tienen también un pay-per-view ese año. Eran uno de los pocos en la historia en lograrlo todo en un mismo año, antes de toda esta transición que hubo, que WCW crece con ese boom. Pero ellos dicen que tanto él como Jimmy Del Rey estaban contentos con su posición en la empresa, y no puedes estar contento. Tienes que mostrarte persona que está constantemente cazando una oportunidad, constantemente intentando hacer algo nuevo, pero cuando te ven así, pues no te prestan mucha atención, y le dicen, pues tal vez debemos haber sido más agresivos en este tiempo. As mentioned, you worked a few matches in WWE, specifically two pay-per-views that I want to talk about. One of them was SummerSlam 1993, where you and Jimmy faced the Steiner brothers. And after that, you faced the Bushwhackers on a dark match in WrestleMania 10. What do you recall of the ambience and performing in front of this huge crowds at that point?
Well, I had been to some WWE events before, just visiting backstage, and I saw the massive machine that was at work. And if you've ever been backstage at a show WWE puts on, it is incredible. It's if you've never seen it, it can be a little overwhelming, and it was overwhelming in the beginning. And here we are now working as talent in Detroit. We didn't know the Steiners. We didn't know Rick and Scott very well, but Jimmy did. Jimmy Cornette did, and they always got along with Jim. And so they tried to rib us in the beginning when we were doing the angles and setting things up for Detroit, and trying to act like they're mad and they're going to, kill us and things like that. But you could tell when we're in the ring if somebody wants to hurt you or not, and they didn't. They were all business, and it was a very it was a down time for WWE, but it was also for us new, exciting, and man, we thought, here we go, we have an opportunity, and we did. So the Steiners went well. Obviously, we did the job, and the Bushwhackers, WrestleMania 10. God, would we have loved to have been on the show? Of course, but we were happy to be in Madison Square Garden. First time ever, Madison Square Garden, and WrestleMania 10, backstage, seeing all the celebrities and seeing people walk by, and all the things that went into making a major show a major show. So that was, while it was certainly different, especially from being a talent, I've seen it, but now I'm a part of it, and just realizing everything, every detail that went into WWE's production was incredible. And it takes so much to produce something like that. Their television people, their television production, I think is second to none. And it was so cool. It was so embracing when we saw that.
Translate that. Entre las múltiples luchas de pay-per-view que ellos tuvieron, él mencionaba que años antes ya había estado backstage en WWE, y solamente estar backstage es una experiencia completamente distinta al resto de las cosas que ha hecho. Pero en el 93 ellos se enfrentaron a los Steiners, a quienes no conocían, al menos Jimmy Del Rey y él, pero Jim Cornette sí los conocía. Entonces tiene esa lucha en Michigan. Eventualmente se enfrenta a los Bushwhackers en WrestleMania 10. Fue un dark match. Claro, sí le hubiese gustado estar en el show como tal, pero era Madison Square Garden por primera vez, casa llena, todas estas celebridades backstage, y pues obviamente la experiencia en general fue muy positiva. During your stay or your time with the WWE, you also competed as a singles competitor, not only with the Heavenly Bodies, and you faced the likes of, I don't know, Shawn Michaels, Bret the Hitman Hart, among many others. After a while, you parted separate pathways from the WWF, and you arrived and did a brief run on the ECW, the original version. How was that experience for you? After going from WWF, an organized, totally political locker room, you enter into a world of freedom and extreme. How was that for you?
Well, especially at that time, it really was walking into the locker room, looking around, saying, "Wow, this isn't so bad," because you had it was the 90s, and of course the 80s was a crazy time, and ECW in the 80s, or pardon me, in the 90s was when they said extreme, they meant extreme. And this was after working as the Body Donnas as well, and coming in, and Chris Candido had gone back to ECW, and I was training people in WWE at that time. So it was, I enjoyed the ambiance of ECW, because you had guys like Van Dam, the Sandman, Tommy Dreamer, Chris Candido, and just at that time, I think Tommy Rich and maybe Tracy Smothers were there too. But it was a lot of fun, and it was that dangerous outlaw feel to it, gunslinger type thing, where the crowd lets you know if they appreciated you or not, and they let you know if you belong there or not. And that was the cool thing about it, because that was a very intimate setting, and it was hot in the summertime, cold in the wintertime, and people were there because they were faithful and loyal to the ECW and Paul Heyman and all the guys that were putting their heart and soul on the line every night. So when I walked in the first time, I just looked around and said, wow, this is interesting. And it was very cool. It really was. It was a cool vibe.
I'll translate it. Ok, Jimmy del Rey y Tom Prichard salen de la WWF en el tiempo que Dr. Tom Prichard estuvo ahí, luchó con Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, etc. Y pasa de ese ambiente político backstage y de momento llega a ECW. Chris Candido, tienes ahí toda esta gente y toda esta vibra de Sandman, tenías a Sabu, tenías a toda la vieja ECW y Paul Heyman comandando el barco y él llega allí, mira para aquí, mira para acá. This is not so bad after all. No está tan mal, es algo distinto. Vamos a ver. Entonces, queda en la costa este, en Filadelfia, y tenías un detalle, y es que el público te dejaba saber si pertenecías ahí o no. Era caliente en los veranos, it was cold in winters, era frío en los inviernos también, y este ambiente era completamente distinto a lo que él estaba acostumbrado. La experiencia fue buena, le gustó, y es algo que pues lo ayudó dentro de todo a crecer en la industria. Y en aquel momento él ya estaba entrenando talento en WWF, que ya mismo vamos a llegar a ese punto. You parted ways from ECW, returned to WWF, and on this run, you finally achieved it. I mean, you were like 8-time tag team champion on Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and you conquered gold in all the territories you went before, but it was finally the time for you and for your tag team partner to conquer the WWF tag team titles at WrestleMania 12 against the Goodwins. The titles were vacated back then. What do you recall at that moment when the referee counted 3, the bell rang, and bam, you're the new tag team champion?
I have to tell you, it wasn't as I would hope it would have been, because the tag team division back then was pretty weak. It was pretty dismal, to say it kindly. And the way the titles even became vacated, partially because of me. I was on the apron one night. Billy Gunn was down on the floor, and I jumped down with an axe handle just right on the back of Billy's neck. Didn't think anything of it, but it broke his neck. And yeah, he kept feeling, but I don't think it was the axe handle. I think it was all the wear and tear, and that might have just been the straw that finally did it. But it was very underwhelming. Again, it was on the pre-show, and Chris and I love Chris Candido, but holy smoke, man, you know, I wish nothing but the best for Tammy Sitch, but during that period, she could be not a very nice person, and it just wasn't clicking. The Body Donnas were. It had to be a rib. It was a rib on us. It just was not a classic top tag team, and we knew it. But at the same time, I mean, you have to admit, or we had to admit, okay, we're the tag team champions, but we didn't have the Road Warriors, we didn't have Demolition, we didn't have Arn and Tully, we didn't have the Rockers, we didn't have all these great teams who, when tag team wrestling was the Hart Foundation, when tag team wrestling was great. It just was at that time, that slump, where we had to, or we got to carry the belts and got to be the champions for a couple months. So while it wasn't exactly as I wish it would have been at the time, it's still not a bad thing to have your name associated with the tag team title. So it was cool, but it was at the same time very, very lackluster and underwhelming.
Yeah, a sweet sour experience. I'll translate it. Ok, Dr. Tom Prichard gana, se va de ECW, vuelve a WWF, gana los campeonatos en pareja ante los Goodwins, específicamente porque ellos ganan el WrestleMania 12, pero los títulos estaban vacantes. ¿Cómo los títulos quedan vacantes? Los luchadores ya estaban bastante maltrechos, la división no era la mejor en aquel momento, y Dr. Tom Prichard se trepa en el apron y le pega un double axe handle a Billy Gunn en el cuello. Y eso acabó de fastidiarlo, queda fuera por la lesión, no esperaba que se iba a ocurrir de esa manera. Historia larga corta, él dice, bueno, ama a Chris Candido, pero Tammy Snitch, que era Sonny en aquel momento, era bastante difícil de trabajar. ganan los títulos tal vez como una especie de rip o de broma, como ellos dicen. Ok, tengo los títulos en pareja por varios meses, la división en pareja ya no tiene a los Road Warriors, ya no tiene a Demolition, ya no tiene a The Heart Foundation, ya no tiene todos estos nombres, ahora los Heavenly Bodies son los campeones, lo tienen por varios meses, como él dice, fue una experiencia, él sabía lo que era, sabía que la división estaba en descenso, pero no está mal ser campeón, así que es una oportunidad que aprovechó al máximo y lo tiene en su resumen, que es lo importante. After that, you competed as Dr. X. It was a pretty particular gimmick. Like, who came up with the idea of it?
Oh, well, once again, that was during my period of training guys, and part of training the guys was going on the road, and I couldn't go on the road as Dr. Tom. They wanted they didn't want that, and I didn't want that. But now I could put on a mask and just be Dr. X, and that was pretty much the simple part of it. And I would go on the road, work with the first three guys I had were a bodybuilder named Malcolm Albrecht, Mark Henry. There's one other guy, Dwayne Johnson. Yeah, him. So I got to go on the road with those guys and work some TV matches with them as well as Dr. X. And that just was, what's your name tonight? How about Dr. X? Sounds great, Dr. X. You know, so that's what it was. I mean, that's all it was. And as not a lot of deep thinking went into that one either. It was just going out there and knowing that we had trained with the guys, knowing that they were comfortable with me, and going out there and having the best matches we could.
I'll translate it. En aquel momento ya él estaba entrenando luchadores para WWF y, ok, los muchachos suyos, dos en particular, un joven WWE Hall of Famer llamado Mark Henry y un muchacho por ahí que hace películas en Hollywood y es buena gente, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, fueron las primeras personas que él entrenó en WWE. O sea, sí, este hombre construyó a The Rock, este hombre construyó a Mark Henry y, ok, vamos a la carretera, no puedo luchar como Dr. Tom Prichard. ¿Qué voy a hacer? Ok, pongo una máscara. ¿Y qué vas a hacer? Ponme Dr. X, ponme Dr. X. Y entonces como Dr. X, él comienza a luchar ayudando a impulsar a estas jóvenes estrellas porque se sentían cómodos, porque estaban trabajando con él en aquel momento. Since we're already on the topic, you started training multiple wrestlers, generation after generation for WWF. But one of your first guys were Dwayne The Rock Johnson, Mark Henry, and Kurt Angle. Like, what a classic three to begin your journey. How was working with them in the initial run they had, but specifically, how do you feel knowing that these three talents that you basically helped create, they are now WWE Hall of Famers, they are now the cream of the crop?
You know, it's always fulfilling when someone succeeds. Even if you've had a day of training them or 15 minutes of being around them, if you said something or did something that they take and whether they use it at that time or not, they carry it with them. And it was always fulfilling and always one of those things to strive for when they would go out and have to work with other guys and learn, because that's the way you learn this craft, is go out and work with people who are better than you. But they were just working with me, and then they'd go out on the road, and now here's where the rubber meets the road. They have to really be tried and true, tested in live events, on television, and all three of those guys really went out and made a success of it. So yeah, three Hall of Famers in Kurt, Rock, and Mark Henry. I was very proud of all three of those guys. Still am to this day. They've accomplished so much and done a great job being ambassadors for the business and really standing up for it and being the face of professional wrestling and not disgracing it or doing stupid things, which is always nice to see too.
Ok. Él entrena a tres jóvenes talentos, The Rock, Kurt Angle y Mark Henry. ¿Qué se siente para él saber que son exitosos? Bueno, se siente bien saber que pudiste haber aportado en todo este trayecto, pero más que eso se siente bien saber que no estén haciendo cosas estúpidas, que estén en buenos pasos y que sean embajadores para la industria de la lucha libre como son estos tres caballeros hoy día. You also train a young man, a third generation wrestler called Randall Keith Orton, today Randy Orton. You work with him on an early stage. Do you thought that Randy had what it takes at that point once you saw it for the first time?
Well, I tell you, when I locked up with Randy, I knew he had something, no doubt. But the key to this business is attitude. Attitude is everything. And I think the key to life is attitude. But Randy was talented, and you knew he was talented by the first time. You could tell when you lock up with someone and you pull them into a hold or you grab a hold, how they react. Randy was a natural. And the only thing that could have held him back, and at times it did, was his attitude. And but I've always got along with Randy. I always got along great with Randy. Never had any problems. He was young. He was young, and you know, with your dad being Bob Orton Jr. on the road all the time, I'm sure he didn't get all the discipline he should have as a kid. So that, I think, played a lot into it, and I understood that. So whenever I was around Randy, it was always a pleasure, and he was from day one, you could tell he had something about him.
Randy Orton entrena con Dr. Tom Prichard y le pregunto si sabía que Randy tenía algo desde el principio. Él dice, desde la primera vez que hacen el lock-up, ahí él dice, este muchacho tiene algo, no es porque sea el hijo de Bob, pero tiene algo. Su problema tal vez era la actitud, era un problema de actitud, lo que lo retuvo un montón de tiempo, era una cuestión de actitud, tal vez algo de disciplina. Recuerden, era el hijo de Bob Orton, pero sí, desde el primer momento en que lo vio, sabía que tenía algo. On the 80s, you did the work, and you were one of the first persons to say, I will help elevate Jeff Jarrett. And then on the 90s, you had a similar job with another son of a promoter, Shane McMahon. You were the one who built him to what he is today. How was that for you? How was that process?
Yeah, well, I got to tell you, I was training guys at that time, and Shane just happened to fall into starting to work with the guys. And I also trained with Vince, and that's how it all kind of snowballed. But what a lot of people don't realize about Shane is he is really a self-starter. He's a guy who, if he doesn't agree with something in business, or he doesn't particularly care for it, he's not afraid to walk away from it. He's not afraid to make his own name. He's not afraid to step out and try something new and be an entrepreneur. He's still one of those guys that I talk to this day. And he always had that gung-ho attitude. I've never, ever seen Shane dog it, whether it's in the ring, in the gym, or in business at the office. He just has this energy. I think it's contagious with the McMahon family. But he was tremendous. He really, really was. And actually all the McMahon family. I've trained every one of them except Linda. And so, you know, but Shane was raised in the business. He had a clue. He knew what was going on, and he was a natural too. And he's a risk taker. He loves taking those risks, and he loves being a daredevil.
I'll translate it. Shane McMahon es uno de los nombres. Dr. Tom Prichard entrenó a Vince, entrenó a Stephanie, entrenó a Shane McMahon. Él tuvo un trabajo en los 80 que fue ayudar a Jeff Jarrett, el hijo de Jerry Jarrett. Ahora le tocaba ayudar a Stephanie y a Shane, los hijos de Vince, con quien estaba entrenando. Y como él dice, Shane es un self-starter. Shane es una persona que empezó por sí mismo, que veía lo que estaba haciendo su papá, que veía lo que estaba haciendo Tom Prichard, que le gustaba esa adrenalina, que le gustaba todo. Es un muchacho con el que habla al día de hoy todavía, que mantienen una buena relación. Pero la clave de esto es que Shane lo quería. Shane quería esto, Shane empezó por sí mismo, Shane creció en esto, Shane se vivió esto, y claro, fue una excelente experiencia entrenar a todas estas personas, específicamente a la familia McMahon. You also were the person in charge, along with Bill DeMott, of the old territory called Deep South Wrestling. I believe it was in the middle of nowhere in Georgia. Difficult place to live, for what I've talked with a few people, but it was so small that everybody knew each other, so that was a good thing. How was for you, you know, being the person in charge of the whole territory that was going to be eventually the WWE superstars?
Once again, looking at it from my eyes, I was looking at everyone to see what their strengths were, and not the weaknesses. We accented the strength and not the weakness of the talent. And you had a lot of great talent it was McDonough, Georgia, right outside of Atlanta. And you're right, it was a small place. And some people it could be a little difficult living in a small town, but you were there to train, you were there to learn your craft, and that's what kept you focused. So it was an interesting transition. It was an interesting job to have in that part of the country, because if you didn't apply yourself, if you weren't focused, there was somebody else behind you ready to take your spot. So you had to be on your toes, you had to be ready, and you had to be focused, and you had to be in tune with training, because if you weren't, you could be gone like that quickly.
I'll translate it. Él estuvo a cargo de Deep South Wrestling junto a Bill DeMott allí en Georgia, un pueblo pequeño. Dice, sí, esa parte era difícil, pero aquí lo interesante era ver cómo el talento crecía. Tú estabas ahí para entrenar, para hacer un trabajo, y eso era todo. Si te dormías, como él dice, si te ibas, había alguien a la parte de atrás de ti dispuesto a quitarte ese lugar por el que estabas trabajando y habías trabajado. Y esa era la dinámica del territorio de desarrollo de Deep South Wrestling en aquel momento. Among the many, many things you've done in your career, there's something I want to talk about, and that's the JP Wrestling Academy located in Tennessee. Dr. Tom Prichard and Glenn Jacobs in Knoxville, Tennessee decided to open a pro wrestling school and do what they did during their whole lives. I mean, you trained Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose, among Bray Wyatt, Randy Orton, The Rock, Kurt Angle, Mark Henry, Vince McMahon, Shane, Stephanie. Like, if you continue that, everyone that's been someone in WWF after the Attitude Era, it's going through your hands. So you decided to open your new project, your new school, to create your own superstars. How did this project came around, and how did Glenn Jacobs got involved in it, the mayor of Knoxville, Tennessee?
It was actually Glenn who suggested this idea. We were having lunch, during his campaign, and I was going to do a seminar, and I was talking to him about it. The next night, we had an event, and he says, "Man, I want to talk to you about something. What do you think about opening a school right here in Knoxville? I'm here, you're here, why not?" And I thought, man, I've done it before. I really don't want to, because I know, here's the deal. I know about the independent guys here in Tennessee, and I know about a lot of the guys who do shows, aren't interested in getting better. They know everything already. You can't tell them anything. And they just want to wrestle and be on a show. And I don't have a problem with that, but if I'm going to train somebody, I have to train them my way. And if you're not serious, or if you come in and laze around and don't take this for what it is, which is a lot of hard work, I get cranky and I get edgy and I yell and scream. But that's my style of teaching too. But I thought about it. And once I did, I thought that might work, especially with Glenn Jacobs. You know, it's the JPWA, not the PJWA. It's the Jacobs Prichard Wrestling Academy. Yeah. So I thought, why not give it a try? Because I tried it on my own, and it just didn't go. So this time we're in our third year now, 2.5 years this time. So we started in 2019, and it has been the ride I thought it would be, but we've already got one signed to NXT. We've had people do extra work. We've got people going to AEW. We've got people working around the various territories, not only here, but in Indiana, the Carolinas, and surrounding areas of Tennessee. So we've been fortunate enough to get some really good people. And we've had some people who wanted to come in and they didn't know what to expect. And I finally had to type a letter up saying, this is what you're going to get when you come train with us. You're going to fall down. It's physical and it's not easy. We train from 6 to 10, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday we reserve for promos. So a lot of people, you know, you have to work, you have to maintain a job, you got to eat, you got to pay rent, you got to the car payment, you got all these things. I understand that, but there's 24 hours in a day. I know people who say whatever it takes, and those are the people who want to come and really fulfill their dream. We will do everything in our power, but you have to do your work too. You have to go to the gym, you have to study, you have to pay attention, you've got to apply what we tell you to do. Some people do and some people don't. So it came about out of a conversation Glenn and I had, and he thought it might be a great idea. I said, no, but then I thought about it. He says, yeah, maybe it would be a great idea. So we've got a really nice building in Knoxville, Tennessee, and we've had some pretty good people come out so far.
I'll translate that. Entre las múltiples cosas que ha hecho Dr. Tom Prichard, Dr. Tom Prichard trabaja o vive en el mismo lugar con Glenn Jacobs, el alcalde de Knoxville en Tennessee, anteriormente Kane en WWE, y en una comida, sentado como parte de su campaña, él le dice, oye, ¿y si abrimos una escuela de lucha libre? Aquí en Knoxville, vamos a abrirla. Ah, no, ya yo he pasado por eso anteriormente, ya la he abierto, yo conozco a los muchachos independientes aquí en Tennessee, ellos no quieren trabajar, no quieren mejorar, ya ellos solo saben todo, y dice que no, inicialmente, pero luego llega a la casa y lo piensa, y dice, ¿sabes qué? Sí, vamos a abrirla, let's do it, vamos a abrir la escuela. Y se toman este proyecto, así nace el Jacobs Prichard Wrestling Academy, allí mismo en Knoxville, en donde la idea está, como él dice, cuando yo me molesto y comienzo a gritarles, obviamente por algo ese estilo de enseñar es un poquito rudo, pero tú aprendes de algo, estás de las manos de una persona que entrenó los mejores en la industria, que ha trabajado en la industria, que conoce con Glenn Jacobs de igual forma, que fue WWE Hall of Famer. Y aquí lo interesante de esto es que entrenan de lunes a jueves, Monday to Thursday, de 6 a 10, 6 de la tarde, de 6 to 10. Y ahí entonces los miércoles o Wednesdays lo sacan para promo class, para clases de promo, y le brindan al talento una oportunidad completa de ir creciendo en la industria. Pero no solamente eso, tú tienes que ir a un gimnasio, you need to go to the gym, tú necesitas ponerte a darle las pesas, necesitas ponerte a correr, need to be in ring shape también por lo tuyo. Entonces hay gente que sigue las instrucciones, hay gente que no, pero las personas que llegan ahí, que no seleccionan a todo el mundo, pueden entonces ser parte de ese batch de superestrella. And that's actually my next question. July 5th, you and Glenn Jacobs will have or will grant the wrestling industry an opportunity. And I'm talking about you're selecting the next new batch of superstars, because everything you touch becomes gold. And that's not hyping. It is what it is. Like, you can see his resume. This is the guy. July 5th, Knoxville, Tennessee. It'll be the moment when you select this new pro wrestling class. What can you talk us about this, and where can people can enroll to be a part of it, to be successful in the wrestling industry?
Well, we do 12 weeks. And again, it's Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, 6 to 10, and Wednesday is 6 to 8 with promo class. But you can go to jpwrestlingacademy.com. It has all the information right there on the first page. There's an application you can apply for. We actually have a kid from Puerto Rico training with us right now, Javier Rosario. He's 18 years old. He came over specifically to train with us. And we've had people from India. We have people from Germany. We've had people from different parts of the world come over just to train with us. And some have got the opportunity and gone out and made the most of it. So we, for 12 weeks, our next session is July 5th through September 24th. That's our summer class. And after that, we have October 4th through December 10th. And then we're done for the year. So we're doing 4 sessions this year. And of course, everybody felt the pain last year of staying inside, not being able to do anything. But JPWA is back up and running. And we've had a great class. We're going on week 9 this week, and we're keeping it rolling. So jpwrestlingacademy.com has all the information with the applications. You can also get my book on the front page. You can check out anything, any answers you have or any questions you have. The answers should be on there.
I'll translate it. JP Wrestling Academy tiene su nuevo batch de estudiantes, comienza sus nuevas clases el 5 de julio hasta septiembre 24, luego en octubre tienen otra sección hasta diciembre 10, pero aquí jpwrestlingacademy.com, jpwrestlingacademy.com para toda la información, para que sean parte de estudiantes de Puerto Rico. Javier Rosario, 18 años, está entrenando con ellos, de India, de Alemania, de todas partes del mundo llegan allí entonces a darse la oportunidad de ser entrenado por el mejor entrenador de todos los tiempos, o sea, el tipo que entrenó de Rock, el tipo que entrenó a Vince McMahon, a Shane, a Roman Reigns, todo el mundo en la industria que ha pasado por las manos de este caballero oro, Randy Orton, entre muchísimas otras personas, Kurt Angle, han pasado por sus manos. Si siguen las instrucciones, si van a esta academia, créanme, van a triunfar en la industria. Simplemente tienen que visitar para más información en la primera página, jpwrestlingacademy.com, para más información. And you spoke of your book. That's actually my next topic, a pro wrestling curriculum advice, suggestions and stories to help the aspiring pro get to the next level. The book is available on Amazon.com. What a title. What a, like, how this did occur?
Well, let me just say this. The title is okay. The way this book came about is WWE wanted a curriculum from day one through the last day of a full year. My philosophy is this: you can't teach A, B, C, D, E because not everybody learns at the same pace. Even though we have a class that starts from day one and we go through day 12. I haven't done the same thing with each class so far in the last 2.5 years. Everybody's different. Everybody picks up things at a different pace. So I had this curriculum ready. Mix and match, add things, take away things, whatever it may be. As soon as I had it ready, they told me my services were no longer needed. So I went ahead and published this curriculum and put it out there. And it doesn't have any pictures in it. It just has ideas. It has stories. It has suggestions. It has drills. But the drills are not, they're not set in stone. You can take this, you can take that, you can take everything and put it together, or you could go right by the book, whatever you want to do. I've had people from Malaysia, a company in Malaysia but email me, tell me that they're using my book as a syllabus for their classes. Also in India, I've also had another person call me email me from India. But the book is suggestions. It has stories. It has again, drills, but it's not the end all be all of wrestling. It's just one way. There's nothing etched in stone that says we have to do it this way. You have your way, I have my way, but the right way, the only way, does not exist. Ricky Steamboat does a hell of an arm drag, but not everybody can arm drag like Ricky Steamboat. Same thing. I teach a headlock takeover one way. Somebody may teach differently. Doesn't make it right or wrong. It makes it different. And that's what makes the world go around. That's what makes wrestling different. And that's what makes wrestling what it is. And why people love it so much is because we have so many different flavors of ice cream to choose from. And if you like this, great. If you like that, great. If it makes you happy, that's what we're supposed to do. Professional wrestling is entertainment, always has been, and it should be fun when you're doing it as well.
Perfect. El libro de Dr. Tom Prichard, Pro Wrestling Curriculum Advice, está disponible en Amazon.com para todos ustedes. ¿Y qué es esto? WWF o WWE le piden que creara un CV desde el día 1 hasta el día último para que todos sus estudiantes y todos sus talentos pudieran aprender y hacerlo de esta manera. Entonces ocurre que cuando ya él tiene el libro listo, le dicen, ya no necesitamos tu servicio, ya tengo el libro listo. Tom Prichard se va a la empresa, lo publica, y entonces ahí tienes, no es que todo tiene que ser de esa manera, tú puedes agarrar un poquito de aquí, agarrar un poquito de acá, agarrar otro poquito de acá, y darle un poco de tu estilo a las cosas. No hay la manera perfecta de hacer un headlock, o de hacer un arm drive, como Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, o de hacer un hip toss, igual que X persona. Cada cual tiene ese estilo, no hay algo erróneo o distinto de hacer, no hay algo erróneo o bueno de hacer, simplemente es diferente, cada cual tiene su estilo, le da su estilo a las cosas, y el libro está disponible en Amazon para todo luchador que de verdad quiera aprender o que esté creciendo y buscando dar el próximo paso en su carrera. Esto es una excelente recomendación. A Pro Wrestling Curriculum Advice de Dr. Tom Prichard, disponible en Amazon.com. You also have your podcast format. I mean, X-Ray, Taking You to School, Wrestling University, What about these programs and what inspired you to start doing podcasting as well for a while?
Man, once again, somebody asked me, John Paz, who we do Taking It to School, asked again, would you be interested in doing a podcast? And I hate to say it like this, but it was like, I don't have enough time to do what I'm doing now. But at the same time, I do understand social. You have to get out there. So John Paz offered me an opportunity on we record on Sunday nights. Then Joe Henry got in touch with me. We did we do Wrestling University. He asked if I'd like to be interested in that. So I don't have time, but we found time. And then the last one was X-Ray with where we would go over old matches, and I would show you why the guys do what they do, what the in-between spots are, what you do in between spots, and how it all comes together, what glue holds the match together. You know, the thing is, if you just do move, and spot, that makes no sense, and there's no continuity to it, then it means nothing. And yes, you have to have high spots, and yes, you have to have flying, and yes, it has to be exciting, but what do you do after that? What do you do in between? How do you get from point A to point B and in between point A and point B? What do you do? And that's what we talk about on there. And now I have a great co-host on there as well. And so we're having fun with that. But I do have 3 podcasts in the works. It's taken any extra time I've had. So whenever I get extra time, I never thought I'd say this, but I enjoy it. I relish it, because even with the extra time and with nothing to do, there's always something to do. But it's a lot of fun, man. And all 3 of them have been great to work with and great to do on a weekly basis.
Perfect. Tom Prichard también tiene 3 podcasts disponibles: X-Ray, Wrestling University y Taking You to School. ¿Cómo ocurre esto? Bueno, John lo llama y le dice, me gustaría que hicieras esto. No tengo mucho tiempo. Entonces busca tiempo y lo hace los domingos por la noche. Ok, X-Ray, tampoco tengo, cuando Joe lo llama, Joe Henry, no tengo mucho tiempo, también lo hace eventualmente, y los tiene disponibles para todos ustedes, específicamente X-Ray, en donde ellos lo que hacen es desmenuzan las luchas y te están mostrando a ti el propósito de por qué hacer cada movida, no spots, no, sino porque la psicología detrás de esto, sino el motivo de por qué tú haces cada una de las movidas, algo muy interesante para cualquier luchador. Así que X-Ray, Taking You to School y Wrestling University, los 3 están disponibles en todas las plataformas de audio como Apple Podcast, Spotify, entre muchísimas otras, así que ahí los pueden escuchar. Dr. Prichard, before we go to our last question, I wanted to thank you so much for your time and for sharing your wisdom with us today. You are a 20-time tag team champion, among many other accolades you have in your CV. Last but not least, what, in your opinion, there's not a perfect answer for this, it's just your opinion, what does the wrestling industry needs to do in order to attract a bigger fan base at this point?
Authenticity. People know when you're being real. People know when they're seeing something that's not. And why, this is what I always bring up, why would a guy like Steve Austin, who was bald, had a beard, goatee and mustache, black trunks, black boots, black knee pad, black vest, as plain as you could get, had a Southern accent. He was one of the biggest stars ever in this business. He was authentic. He was a real deal. Why is The Rock one of the biggest stars, not only in wrestling, but in Hollywood? The guy you see is the guy who really is. He of course, he has the volume turned up. And of course, we all have our good and bad days, but he's authentic. Brock Lesnar is authentic. When he goes to the ring, he has that element of danger. He has that element of mystery. He doesn't tell everybody what's going on. You're not sure about him. And I believe that's a huge element that's missing today is authenticity. When people see something in the ring, we know nobody's trying to insult anybody's intelligence anymore. But what is it when Brock Lesnar goes to the ring and he throws those live rounds and splits somebody open? Is it an accident? Was it on purpose? Nobody knows except Brock and his opponent. And sometimes his opponent may not even know. So I really believe when I was coming up, there was a mystery. We didn't tell everybody, hey, this is what I had to eat today. Hey, thank you for having that great match with me. The guys go on Facebook and say, hey, thanks for that great match. This is what we did. I understand. I didn't grow up with social media. I grew up watching professional wrestling. And while of course, finally at 10 years old, you're looking and you hear things, you see things, and you realize, you go, well, wait a minute, there's something to this, but there's also something to this. The realism, I don't know if you can duplicate, but I'll tell you what, when Brock Lesnar goes to the ring, he's pretty real. And one more thing before, just to wrap it up, there was a guy named Johnny Valentine who used to say, I may not be able to make him believe in wrestling, but I can sure make him believe in me. And that's the mantra Brock Lesnar goes by. Everybody else may be phony, fake, predetermined, all that stuff. But when I go to the ring, I'm going to show you a different style, a different method, a different attitude. And that's what's missing today. The Attitude Era has not been duplicated since, and for good reason, because while Roman Reigns is great, Randy Orton's great, you have some great talent right now, but I don't believe you can hamstring those guys by writing promos and trying to script things that don't need to be scripted. The guys need to figure it out. What is authentic? And that's what's missing today.
Of course, I completely agree with that. I'll translate it. ¿Qué hace falta en la industria de la lucha libre para atraer más fanáticos a la industria? Actitud. Es una cuestión de actitud. Cuando tú tenías a Stone Cold, que era el tipo más plain, el goatee, pantalón, o sea, truza negra, el chaleco negro, calvo, era un tipo normal, el acento sureño, el Southern accent, como él dice, que era lo que tenía distinto, actitud, autenticidad. Esa es la clave de esto, era auténtico, era distinto. La clave es la autenticidad. ¿Qué hay de Brock Lesnar? Brock Lesnar es un tipo que se trepa al cuadrilátero, tú lo ves así enorme, pero es un tipo que cuando te da un codazo en la frente y te abre, tú no sabes si está scripted, si es algo que pasó intencional, si había hit entre las dos personas. ¿Quién lo sabe? Solamente Brock Lesnar y su oponente. Dos personas, más nadie. Y a veces su oponente ni lo sabe. Brock Lesnar es un tipo que le dice, como le dijo Johnny Valentine, yo no los puedo hacer creer en la industria de la lucha libre, pero yo los puedo hacer creer en mí. Brock Lesnar vive por esa misma mentalidad de autenticidad. ¿Y por qué motivo no se ha podido recrear el Attitude Era en aquel momento? Tienes superestrellas grandes, tienes a Roman Reigns, tú tienes a Randy Orton, hay muchas otras superestrellas muy buenas en este entonces, pero la realidad es que hace falta ese toque auténtico en la industria de la lucha libre que te separe del resto. Crear, esa es la clave, crear, no es el número, es crear estrellas de calidad y auténticas y diferentes con las cuales te puedas identificar. Antes de irnos una vez más, jpwrestlingacademy.com. Pueden seguir a Dr. Tom Prichard en Twitter como @Dr. Tom Prichard, @Dr. Tom Prichard en Twitter. De igual manera, a JP Wrestling Academy también los pueden seguir en Twitter, están ahí disponibles. Y su libro, al igual que les mencioné, está disponible en Amazon.com, a Pro Wrestling Curriculum Advice y X-Ray Taking You to School y Wrestling University, los tres disponibles en toda plataforma de audio como Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, Breaker, iHeartRadio, todos lados está disponible. Dr. Prichard, once again, an honor, sir, to have you here as our guest. Always wishing you success in your career and in your personal life, and thank you very much for your time.
Well, Michael, thank you for having me. I really do appreciate it, man. And best of luck to you too.
Thank you very much, sir. Y este fueron Dr. Tom Prichard y Michael Morales Torres para Lucha Libre Online, la marca número 1 de Pro Wrestling y Combat Sports en español.